Hi y'all, welcome and welcome back to this video on Socrates and the Apology. Socrates, the father of Western philosophy. When we ask the big questions, like what does it mean to live a good life? What is truth? Or what makes us human? We are, knowingly or not, walking in the philosophical footsteps of Socrates. Often referred to as the father of Western philosophy, Socrates didn't leave behind any written works, and yet, over 2,000 years later, his ideas, methods, and values continue to shape how we think, question, and live. Who was Socrates? Socrates lived in ancient Athens from approximately 470 to 399 BCE. Most of what we know about him comes from the writings of his students, most notably Plato and Xenophon. Because Socrates never wrote anything himself, scholars refer to the Socratic problem. This is the difficulty of distinguishing Socrates' actual beliefs from the interpretations of his followers. Despite this uncertainty, one thing is clear: Socrates changed philosophy forever. A unique philosopher. Socrates was a unique figure, reportedly unattractive, poor, and intensely curious. He served in the military, fathered children later in life, and walked the streets of Athens barefoot, engaging strangers and friends alike in conversations about issues such as justice, virtue, and happiness, and the meaning of life. His method was dialogue, and his aim was the truth. Why is Socrates so important? Socrates is important not because he gave us answers, but because he gave us a method, a way of approaching questions about human life and morality that still resonates. Historian Bettany Hughes writes in her book, The Hemlock Cup, that we think the way we do because Socrates thought the way he did. Socrates taught us that the good life begins with self-examination. His most famous quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living," suggests that to be truly human is to question, to reflect, and to seek understanding. Socrates on society. Hughes also notes that Socrates saw the dangers of mindless materialism and shallow democracy. His insights into human behavior, political life, and moral responsibility feel just as relevant today as they did in ancient Athens. The Socratic method. Rather than give lectures or dogmatic teachings, Socrates engaged in what we now call the Socratic method. This method involves asking a series of questions aimed at revealing contradictions in a person's beliefs, thereby encouraging deeper thinking. Socrates believed that through reasoned dialogue, people could move closer to the truth. His method was dialectical, questioning, probing, refining, and it laid the foundation for Western logic and philosophical reasoning. What did Socrates teach? Socrates had several key philosophical beliefs, many of which centered on virtue, knowledge, and happiness. He believed that virtue is the only true good. Material things like wealth or reputation are secondary and unreliable. He thought it's better to suffer injustice than to commit it. This radical claim rests on the belief that moral integrity matters more than external consequences. He thought that wrongdoing results from ignorance. So Socrates maintained that no one knowingly does wrong. He thought that if someone acts immorally, it's because they don't truly understand what's good. So if you're doing something wrong or something bad, you're not doing it out of some sort of malicious intent, but rather because you're ignorant of what the good is. He also thought that self-knowledge leads to virtue. Socrates urges people to know thyself because he believed that understanding yourself was the first step to becoming virtuous and ultimately happy. Moral integrity. Socrates believed that damaging your soul through immoral acts harms you far more than being the victim of injustice. One powerful illustration of this idea compares two people. One who falsely accuses a friend under a brutal regime, and the other, the friend who suffers torture and death. Socrates would argue that the accuser has harmed themselves more deeply by acting unjustly, even if they benefit externally. So a person who falsely accuses a friend in order to gain some sort of advantage has harmed their soul and done themselves and their moral integrity more damage than the person who was wrongfully accused. The trial and death of Socrates. In 399 BCE, Socrates was put on trial for impiety and corrupting the youth. Rather than flee when given the chance to escape death, he chose to accept his punishment. He drank a cup of hemlock and died surrounded by friends. Socrates believed that abandoning his principles would be worse than death. He lived by his values until the very end, making him not just a thinker, but a martyr for philosophy. The Apology of Socrates. What is the Apology? So this is one of the most important texts for understanding Socrates. Plato wrote this work called The Apology of Socrates. Now, despite the title, this is not an apology in the modern sense of the word apology, like when we say I'm sorry to someone about something. In ancient Greek, apologia means a defense speech. So instead of seeing this as the apology of Socrates, this is the defense of Socrates. Plato is presenting Socrates' words to the jury as he responds to the charges against him. Now, we cannot know whether Plato recorded Socrates' exact words or crafted them in his own way, but the dialogue gives us a vivid picture of Socrates' principles. Before we get into talking about truth versus rhetoric in Socrates' speech, as given to us by Plato, I do want to point out that Plato was at the trial of Socrates. So he is reliable in the sense that he was actually there. So let's go with talking about truth versus rhetoric. At the beginning of his speech in the Apology, Socrates comments on the persuasive power of his accusers. Their rhetoric, he says, almost made him forget who he was. Yet he insists that their speeches were full of falsehoods. Socrates makes a sharp distinction between the art of persuasion and the pursuit of truth. He claims that if he is eloquent at all, it's only because he speaks honestly. This moment highlights a tension that continues today. Are we more moved by style or by substance? Socrates challenges us to value truth over persuasion. His accuser's words may sound impressive, but he reminds the jury and us that words without truth are empty. Justice over style. Socrates next turns to his own speech. He points out that he's over 70 years old and he has never appeared in court before. He does not know the formal style of legal rhetoric. Instead, he asks the jury to focus not on his manner of speaking, but on whether his cause is just. This is a powerful moment because Socrates is asking us to rethink what truly matters in communication. Is it polished delivery, or is it the justice of the ideas being expressed? His defense is not about clever arguments, but about bearing witness to the truth. In this way, the Apology models philosophy itself, a practice of seeking justice and truth regardless of appearances. The Unexamined Life. The most famous line in the Apology comes when Socrates declares, "The greatest good of man is daily to converse about virtue, and all that concerning which you hear me examining myself and others, and that the life which is unexamined is not worth living." This statement captures the essence of Socratic philosophy. For Socrates, the best life is one spent in reflection, conversation, and the pursuit of virtue. Philosophy is not just an academic subject, it's a way of life. To live an examined life means to question our assumptions, reflect on our values, and consider whether our actions align with justice and truth. Socrates suggests that without this kind of reflection, life loses its deepest meaning. This is why he was willing to risk death rather than to stop practicing philosophy. For him, abandoning the examined life would have been worse than dying. Why it matters today. The Apology is not just an ancient text, it's a challenge that reaches across time. Socrates asks us to think about our own lives. Do we value truth even when it's less persuasive than a polished presentation? Do we care more about justice than appearances? Are we living examined lives or simply going through the motions? For college students, these questions are especially pressing. Education is not just about gaining job skills. It's also about reflecting on who we are, what we value, and how we want to live. Socrates reminds us that philosophy is not abstract, it's a practical guide for living meaningfully. Conclusion. Socrates' trial and death made him into a symbol of intellectual courage. He chose to stand by his principles even when it cost him his life. In the Apology, we see his commitment to truth, justice, and the examined life. These themes continue to shape philosophy and education today. As you read the excerpts from the Apology, think about how Socrates' defense speaks to our own culture. We live in a world full of persuasive speech, in politics, advertising, and media. Socrates would ask us, are we being persuaded by style, or are we being guided by truth? And most importantly, are we willing to examine our own lives with honesty and courage? Socrates' legacy. Socrates' influence did not end with his death. Thanks to Plato and others, his ideas have endured for centuries. His commitment to truth, rational inquiry, and moral integrity continue to inspire thinkers, educators, and students around the world. As Nina Rosenstand writes in The Moral of the Story, you can kill a thinker, but not his thoughts. Socrates lives on in every classroom, courtroom, and conversation where we dare to ask what is the right thing to do. Even today, his life challenges us to reflect on our own. Are we examining our beliefs? Are we living with integrity? Are we truly thinking for ourselves? As long as we ask those questions, Socrates walks beside us. Okay, so thanks for hanging with me on this one. My dog is playing in the background, and I get emotional every time I talk about Socrates and his trial and his death. And I just think he was an amazing person for doing what he did. But y'all stuck with me, so thank you for sticking with me. Here are some reflection questions for you to consider. Do I examine my beliefs and choices regularly? Do I value truth over appearance? And would I stand by my principles under pressure? That last one is the one that I think about a lot. All right, y'all, that's all for now. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in more videos about Socrates or other videos about philosophy and ethics, check out the videos posted on our channel. Y'all have a great day.